Most people know what they would love to do. They've got a hobby or a passion or something, but they don't think that they can make money in it. There's some reason keeping them away from doing what they love doing. If you're depressed and anxious, it's because you're not grateful for whatever you got. You cannot create a new reality by fighting your current one. That means trying harder with what you're doing. You have to create a new reality that renders your previous one as obsolete.
You're a Baal Tshuva. What was missing before you had, whether it's Kabbalah or Chassidus, whatever drew you in? What were you missing that you made that shift? Because it's a big shift. It adds a whole another top-down a top-down what I should be. It offers what I should be doing with my life as opposed to what I need to be doing or could be doing. It offers a should, like a certain objective reality from the outside that I need to relate with and have a relationship with. So, yeah, what triggered the switch, and how did that process go?
Okay. So there was no should in my life, and I wasn't missing anything. What I do today professionally is I help people break through unconscious blockages and patterns. There can only be a blockage. There can only be a breakthrough where there is a blockage. And there are essentially only three blockages. There are many patterns, but there are three blockages. Blockages in personal income, blockages in intimate relationships, and blockages in chronic health. Those are the three blockages. The Torah calls these Banai, Chayai, Mazana. Banai being my sons or my children, so no intimate relationship, no kids. Chayai being my life. If you've got chronic health issues, then it heavily impacts the quality of your life, like chronic back pain. I'm not talking about flu, I'm talking about chronic stuff, organ stuff, back pain, migraines, chronic stuff. That would be Chayai. And an income blockage or a money block, which would be Mezonai, my sustenance. And when a person's very young, they're not aware that they've got these things. And even when they encounter these problems, they don't think that it's a blockage. They think they're just, if I've got a money block, I just haven't taken money seriously yet, so I'm going to take it seriously now. If it's a relationship block, it's like, it's not that. I just haven't taken it seriously now. There's all these conscious reasons about why I haven't been able to, progress in this specific field. So when I discovered at age 25 or so, 25, 26, that I could not earn money. Couldn't earn money. Didn't matter what I did, didn't matter how, I could not earn money. And people may think, well, educated people make money. Well, that's actually not true, because there are lawyers that are broke and there are lawyers that are wealthy. There are doctors that are broke and doctors that are wealthy. Whatever profession you can think about, whatever education you can think about, there are people that are broke and there are people that are wealthy. So it can't be an education thing or even a job thing. I finally manifested a life where I had a dead-end job, a very, very dead-end job. And before that, I had quite nice jobs. I was an entrepreneur and I had a restaurant. I earned more than I learned, mostly about partners and bad partners. And I did all these things. At some point, I was managing a very large fleet because I've always had pretty good management and leadership capabilities. But then it was around 2010. I was living in South Africa, and it was the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup was there. And it was around June, July, or August. And then towards the end of that year, the money just ended, and I didn't know what to do, and I got a job. And this job was at a safety deposit box facility, at the facility where you got the safety deposit box with two keys. Like you see in the movies with the posh people, and they keep whatever documents or passports or money in these boxes. It was a private facility like that. And I was in sales, and I could not sell these boxes. Couldn't, because the truth is, there's no urgency. If a person needs it, they'll get it tomorrow. If they don't need it, you're not going to make the deal. And then I tried to get a different job, and I couldn't. And then the guys offered me to be in charge of security and maintenance, is what they called it. But in actual fact, they wanted someone who looks nice to be able to greet the people who came in. And in Tachlis, it was opening and closing a gate. And when the reality of that sank, like this is what I'm doing, I fell into a deep depression, because it was such a fall from grace for me. And even though I couldn't make money, I was actually doing pretty good work in these previous ventures and working with people and motivating me, whether it was waiters and staff, or whether it was foremen and site managers at the construction sites and what have you. I was always interacting with people and doing some form of coaching. I wasn't aware that it was coaching though. And then I found myself in this closed place, opening and closing a gate with no one ready to speak to or add any value. And I got very, very, very depressed. It was actually depressive anxiety. This was in 2011. And I decided at that job that I was going to do everything. I knew that the mind creates reality. I knew that I created my reality. That's one thing I knew because I was reading all these books. And I couldn't understand how I created this. How, like someone like me who had this and this and did this and did that, all of a sudden here I was in the most meaningless job, doing the most meaningless work. And the one thing that I could latch onto was that in my other jobs, while I wasn't earning money, there was some form of meaningfulness. And the lack of meaning in my work just really crushed me. And basically, I got really, really, really depressed and anxious, really bad. And to cut quite a long story short, I decided I was gonna do everything that I could to learn about how the mind works and how nature works in order for me to learn how I created this reality so that I could change it. And that brought me to universal laws. And the universal laws and nature is the numerical value, Hateva, of 86, which is the same numerical value of the name of God that created the world, Elohim. And so I started learning these laws and I got obsessed with them. And I learned them really, 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 really well. And I found out that another word for the laws is the truth. The law of mentalism, which introduces consciousness, connects my mind to the greater mind. The law of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without. That's why we know that if we do the inside work, the outside life will change because there is a correspondence. It also, the law of correspondence also means that there is correspondence between the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane, which basically means it's also called the law of metaphor or analogy. That's why you can give examples in analogy and the principles remain the same in another field. The law of vibration, everything vibrates. This is E equals MC squared. I started learning about the laws. And another word for the laws, these universal laws, is the truth. Why do I call it the truth? Because perception is flawed. It was Einstein who said that reality is all an illusion, albeit a very consistent one. And what that means is that if we could see things as they actually are, we would just see atoms everywhere. We would see a world and a universe full of atoms like the sea is full of water. Okay? So we're not perceiving what is. We only have a very, very, very limited, a tiny, tiny, tiny slit of what there is out there in our scope of perception. So if everything's an illusion, I wanted to know what's the truth. Within the illusion, how could I, within the illusion, perceive or come to understand the truth and build a model of reality that is based on laws, aka truth, and not perception. To use Torah language, I wanted my da'at, my perception, to perceive truth. Because if you're perceiving this, it's not 100%. Okay? So I wanted to build a model of reality where I'm living according to laws and understanding laws and not reacting to what I perceive and holding my cool, keeping my peace, because that's the most important thing. And so I started learning these laws. Why? So that I could come out of the hellhole that I'd created. Ironically, the name of this safety deposit box facility that I was working at was called Knox, K-N-O-X. So I really did go through the school of hard knocks and graduated. So I started learning these laws. And these laws are the truth. These are the natural laws. By the way, these are Elohim, it's nature. And Pharaoh, Paro, knew about these really, really well. He didn't know who Yud-Kei Vav-Kei was, the God of mercy, the merciful God, but he knew who the non-discerning God was, the God of nature, the God of the natural laws, what creates this world that we live in. So the 7 laws are just to run through them so people have an idea or an understanding. You've got 3 immutable, which means that you cannot do anything about them. They just are. And they are the law of mentalism, correspondence, and vibration. So the law of mentalism introduces consciousness. My little mind is connected to the greater mind like a franchise, if you will, or an outlet. The second one is correspondence, as within, so without. And what this means is that as long as I do my inside work, or my inner world, then the outer world will begin to correspond. And that's why if you want to change your life, you have to do the inner work. And it also says, as above, so below. It's like a mirroring effect. So what happens on the inside, like a mirror effect, and like above, like a mirror effect. It's also called the law of analogy or metaphor, because there is correspondence between the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane, soul, body, mind, and soul. And that's why you can give metaphors, analogies. And that's also how I'm able to do shadow work, because what's happening on a level of positive is it started on the level of negative, just like the Kodak pictures. The third one being vibration. And we know that through E equals mc squared, that energy equals mass at a certain speed. So that's the law of vibration. Everything vibrates. And for those of you that are into manifestation, we can manifest things because of these 7 laws. The 7 laws are the mechanics of manifestation. So those are the 3 immutable laws. They just are. Then you've got the 4 mutable laws, meaning that you do have some say in them. They are the law of polarity. This is the law that governs positive and negative, like the yin yang, that are one thing that are expressed into 2 things. Like temperature is one thing, but it's got a negative called cold and a positive called hot. And everything can be explained in duality. Then you've got the law of gender, and this is the law that governs male and female and how they interact. It's also called the law of creation, because when male, a masculine principle, and a feminine principle, when they interact, the masculine gives of itself and the female receives into herself, holds it. We call that gestational pregnancy, and then creates or manifests. In Kabbalah, that's called mashpia and mekavel, or zuchra and nukva, zachar and nekeva. Then you've got the law of cause and effect, and that's the story of life. That's the river of life. Nothing's going to come to you unless it comes through cause and effect, through the story. And then you've got the law of rhythm, which is what governs motion. So if you've got a pendulum and you let go of it, it's going to swing exactly until it comes to a place of equilibrium. And this happens with everything. It happens with emotions. It happens with weather. It happens with markets. This is a law, the law of rhythm. There is a law that governs motion. So I started studying these laws in order to build a model of reality that's based on laws, on like what's actually going on and not just my perception. So I started learning these things and became obsessed with them. And while I was at this dead-end job, feeling very, 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 very depressed and very, very, very anxious, I was broke and unhappy, and I hated waking up, and I even hated going to sleep because I knew I was going to wake up into this really dark reality. But at some point, they clicked. And without going into a very long story, my life did change. And I started living a bit of a fairy tale of a life. When things really clicked, and I started living according to these laws, and I had the courage to do things in spite of my fears. And I'll explain exactly what I mean. Most people know what they would love to do. They've got a hobby or a passion or something, but they don't think that they can make money in it. And they don't think that they'll be able to pay bills. Or there's some reason keeping them away from doing what they love doing. And that's a fear, right? Some people say that fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And so I decided that I reached the conclusion that what got me into that dead-end job was me doing things for money. I had a money block. I realized that if I carried on with this guiding principle of I need to do things for money, I need to get money in order to pay bills, I need to get money in order to do this, and this is a very common thing. If I carried on doing that, I was going to carry on finding myself in these like very unhappy situations, because almost basically every job that I ever had, I was like, at some point, I would like, when is this going to end? It didn't matter what it was. Any business that I had, any job that I had, even if initially there was fun, at some point, I wanted it to end. So I knew that if I only did if I carried on doing what I always did, I would carry on getting what I always got. That's the law of cause and effect. So I decided, you know what? Being broke is not new for me. I was 28 at the time. Being broke is not new for me. In fact, I'm pretty good at it. But somehow, never died, never really missed a meal. Always had a bed to sleep in. Always had hot water to shower in. And it just happens to be that I spent some time in the Israeli military, so I know what it's like to not sleep on a bed, and I know what it's like to not have hot running water. So I was able to really get granular with the things that I could be grateful for. Because if you're depressed and anxious, it's because you're not grateful for whatever you got. That you cannot be grateful, truly grateful for what you got, and also be upset for the things you don't have at the same time. It's an impossibility. So I decided that I was going to just do what I love and struggle. I've been struggling for 28 years, or not 28 years, for my adult life, let's call it 8 years. I've been struggling for 8 years. Somehow, still managed to stay alive, still managed to get things done. So at least now I was going to be happy. And I got to a point then, and again, I'm just making a long story that's full of details much shorter. I figured out that I love coaching, and I decided I'm going to coach. And even if I struggle, I'm just going to be a struggling coach, but by gosh, I'm going to be happy. Okay. And I did that. And if you're really happy with what you're doing, you're fulfilled, you enter into a high vibration. And when you're in a high vibration, you attract good things and you attract abundance. And I was so grateful to be doing what I love doing. And that is a recipe for abundance. And so I became abundant. And life just got really just better and better because I was living my life according to the model of reality that I'd created based on laws. And just as a little caveat, one of the books that I read in my 20s was a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'm sure many people have heard of it. It's a classic. Mm-hmm. And in this book, Robert Kiyosaki, he quotes a lot a philosopher called Buckminster Fuller. And Buckminster Fuller, he said, you cannot create a new reality by fighting your current one. That means trying harder with what you're doing. You have to create a new reality that renders your previous one as obsolete. And that really hit home for me. So I knew that I had to do things differently. I had to think of things differently. I had to change my value system. I had to change my priorities. And I had to create a new routine. And that's basically what transformation is. Transformation is a rearrangement of values and priorities that results in a change of routine, because routine is just a set of cause and effect.
It's like Lech Lecha, the start of this nation, right? When we got to Avram, it's really when we started, right? Our forefathers. Yeah. His starting mission is leave your house, leave your family, leave your land, and then Lecha, for yourself. Meaning there's a certain, and then Rashi there puts for your pleasure, for your fame, for your glory, for your and obviously he's not saying like go with those things as your aim. It's just by going out. It's by jumping into this adventure, willing to like wander off into the wilderness, trusting God to a degree.
Not to a degree.
Yeah, trusting God.
Fully, completely, and totally, as you would in a trust fall. When you do a trust fall, a true trust fall, you fall backwards, God catches you every time. Never not. It's only when you don't have the real trust that he goes, no, you haven't really done it properly. You didn't close your eyes. You didn't fall backwards. You fell forwards. You didn't really close your eyes. But when you truly close your eyes and you fall backwards, I've seen this not tens of times. I've seen this hundreds of times. When you do a true trust fall, God catches you. So remember, I'm answering a question of yours. So I basically saw that following the laws, truth, as opposed to perception, really, really worked. Really worked. So I became more obsessed with truth than I had ever become before, because I had a real life experience of full, complete, 180, and other people even use the word biblical transformation. It was so radical. It was so extreme that I was completely bought. So for me, it was truth no matter what. And the one thing that keeps a person from the real truth and from living the truth is their self-image and what their ego wants for them or what they think they want. And that goes back to what we said about self-discovery. So I was so obsessed with truth, that I was willing to let go, to change, to just drop whatever it was that wasn't truth. The moment that I perceived real truth, I was ready like this, committed to just change whatever I needed to change. So at some point, I was so interested in the laws and so obsessed, and I became really well-versed and an expert. I started learning Chassidus, and then at some point later on Kabbalah, in order to find the similarities between the universal laws and their derivatives. And what I mean by derivative is that the law of mentalism, a derivative of the law of mentalism is consciousness, but I haven't met anyone who's going to say that. A derivative of the law of vibration is frequency. And that's essentially what I do. I help people raise their vibrational frequency into a higher bandwidth, where these blockages that I spoke about, the Bana Chaim and Zane, they don't exist in a higher frequency of consciousness, in a high frequency, a higher bandwidth of vibrational frequency, which corresponds to consciousness. As you go up in your frequency, in your bandwidth, your consciousness expands. It's the same thing. So that's derivative of the law of vibration. But I've never heard anyone really say this. I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm just saying that I was really, really, really obsessed with it, and I found myself able to connect many dots and many books of self-development that for most people, there's like, I've got this, and then there's a blank, and I've got this, and then there's a blank, and I've got this, and there's a blank. And something happened with my understanding of the laws, that there weren't any more blanks, and everything sort of like blended and became one, not necessarily by the names that were in the books, but by more esoteric concepts. And so once I started learning Kabbalah and Chassidus, I started finding everything there, all of the laws, the relationship between male and female by the definitions that I understood, how to expand consciousness, the inherent power in the negative polarity, right? So all of Judaism is about the negative, right? Negative is the female. Shabbat is the female, right? Because it's a day of being, not of doing. Doing is male, being is female. Kabbalah means receiving. Negative is receiving, as opposed to giving, which is male. And just everything revolved around the negative. We'll call it the divine negative, because on the spiritual sense, the negative creates the positive. There's no seed. There's no seed in the spiritual realm. The negative creates the positive. The yerida, the descent, the contraction creates the aliyah, the ascent or the expansion. It's only in the physical sense that there is seed, because in this physical sense, nothing lasts forever. Nothing is eternal, but there is perpetuity. There is legacy. And the only way that legacy happens is through seed. That's, in my opinion, that's why Adam was created before Eve, because man contains seed on this physical plane, whereas there's no seed in the spiritual plane. Anyway, I became pretty much bought into this whole Kabbalah Chassidus thing, because that's where true self-development is. All the books that you know about self-development, you're not going to find them necessarily in the simple Torah. You're going to find them in deeper parts, what are called the innards, the pnimiyut Torah, the innards of Torah, Chassidus and Kabbalah, and these other innards. So I was for many years, I became what I call a closet Chassid. I mean, I didn't look Jewish, but if people go to my YouTube channel, I don't look Jewish there, but I was actually like a closet Chassid. I could read from the Torah. I could give shiurim. I was a Shabbos Jew. I wore the uniform on Shabbos, and then when Shabbos was over, my self-image, my ego wouldn't allow me to look like that, sort of like in the world.
Interesting.
And then I found, it was referred to me, a video by a specific rabbi who had a near-death experience. And I hadn't watched near-death experiences. So, I mean, I knew what they were, but I hadn't really taken interest in them. And this was a guy called Rabbi Alon Anava. I'm sure many people have heard of him. He's quite a well-known personality now on YouTube and in the Torah world. Very, very knowledgeable guy. Very, very knowledgeable. And he had a near-death experience. And so when I used to go to shiurim, and a rabbi would give a shiur lesson on the Torah, and then he would say, and this is how the mind works. If it didn't comply with my experience of the mind, I wouldn't just disagree with him. I would cancel his entire shiur. I would just disregard everything, because he became he was not creditworthy. He became an unreliable source of information for me, because he made that practical mistake in my own arrogance. But when Alon Anava was giving his testimony, which people can find on YouTube, it's a 2-hour video, I couldn't disagree with anything because he wasn't giving a lesson. He was telling his experience. It was just a simple testimony. And here's the kicker. My expertise is the unconscious mind. But the way the unconscious mind gets formed is that when the neshama, the soul, comes into the body, then there's a duality of mind. There's conscious and unconscious mind. When the neshama is outside of the body, there's no duality of mind. There's a singularity of mind called keter, or superconscious. So everything that he was telling in his experience about when he went up to heaven and everything that he went through, everything that he was telling was it verified my entire coaching philosophy, because he was talking about things and I could relate to the laws and the principles of what he was saying. And everything was like, I got that right, I got that right, I got that right, I got that right. And it really blew my mind to Kingdom Come. And it just showed me that everything that he was saying actually was truth. I believed it. And in that moment, after that 2-hour video, I watched it in English and in Hebrew. I'm fluent in both languages. And I looked for everything else that he had to say because I was so fascinated. And I started watching other near-death experiences. And the way that I got into the mind was I was reading books on success. I started with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then I read another book. And so it was all about books about business success and financial success. And while everyone had their own sort of formula, everyone, without fail, made a reference to a state of mind. Everyone without fail. So I'm saying while everyone had their own, path to the promised land, so to speak, everyone spoke about a state of mind. And I was like, well, I should look at this mind thing. And so the same thing happened when I was watching these near-death experiences. While everyone had their own experience, there were certain aspects that were just the same for everyone. And then I was like, okay, this is truth. And it's not like I wasn't living that life. I was more religious than not. I kept Shabbos to the best of my ability, to the best of my knowledge. There were things I didn't know. I had a very strict diet. So I wasn't eating unkosher. I would make a bracha before and after. I was fairly knowledgeable, And then when I listened to this, what happens to the neshama in heaven, then it changed everything for me. In fact, today I don't see the mind as the unconscious mind. I see it as the neshama in the body. So I don't see the unconscious mind as the unconscious mind like I used to. It's still my field of work and my field of expertise, but I see it now as in the greater field of the neshama, which comes from a much, much, much holier place, higher place, and a different place. When it comes into this realm, it needs a suit. Just like you want to go to space, you need a space suit. You want to go to the sea, you need scuba gear. When the neshama wants to come here, it needs this whole gear. And it changed the way that I looked at it, how I looked at the unconscious mind. And that brings me back to what I said to you about Tzmimut, about that innocence. Yeah, and the inner child is that the neshama is innocence. It's perfect, untainted, and it comes into this body, and the good and the bad gets mingled all together. But there's still a sense of innocence. There's still a sense of pure goodness, and which is the inner child. So that's the long answer to your question. Nothing was missing from my life. There was no should. I was so committed and devoted to truth and living it that when the truth presented itself to me, I jumped in.
You knew what you were looking for. You were very aware of what you were. I guess it's almost like Rabbi Anava gave you as like a whole new language to everything that you have known, like a whole new lexicon or something. Like our ability to articulate that which we know is the only way that which we know becomes relevant to anybody outside of ourselves.
The way that I explain it is that I was putting together this puzzle because the unconscious mind is oblivion, and unfortunately there are no courses or degrees that you can do in the unconscious mind. In fact, a lot of the courses on psychology, they completely disregard many, many crucial premises and principles of the unconscious mind. Crucial. But I was developing this model of the unconscious mind, and I was developing, let's call it a puzzle. And just for the sake of this analogy, let's say I had one piece missing. And this is not real. I'm just saying, just for analogy, what he gave me. There was one piece missing, and he gave me this piece. And as I put the piece in the puzzle the puzzle did not become complete. The whole puzzle, my whole puzzle, became one part, one little piece in a much bigger puzzle called the world of souls.
So, to ask a little bit wild of a question, because I feel like you'd be the right person to ask this question too. I was talking to my friend about it last night. So we learn, at least I learned in Tanya, that the soul, the neshama, is the godly soul is somehow unique. It's something unique about it being with Jews. Like we have a neshama as opposed to what other people have, right? And in the Torah it says Vayibach ba'apiv nishmas chaim, which means, and then Unkelos the ruach memamela. So there's something about speaking and the speaking spirit that is neshama or consciousness, whatever word we're going to use for it. It's what allows for speech, and somehow that's what we can point to. So obviously non-Jews have consciousness and they have a neshama. So I'm not going to ask you what is the difference between a Jewish neshama and a non-Jewish neshama. More, I'm going to ask you, a Jew who takes psychedelics versus a non-Jew who takes psychedelics. What do you think having a neshama, like what role do you think that plays in that journey? Like, is there a more like a Jew who's describing his near-death experience or his psychedelic experience? Is there something different about that we could than when a non-Jewish person, however righteous and full of wisdom and truth he is there something fundamentally different about that experience?
Okay. So the answer to your question is I don't know, but I have an opinion.
Let's go with that.
The Pinteliad. That point of a Jew that if you say to a Jew, bow down to this idol, or I will kill you, or that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Pinteliad, because there are many people that do psychedelics that are Jewish that it doesn't do anything to them, at least not on a Jewish level. Many, more than I can count. So I don't know how to answer your question, but what I can say is this: is that those that have an inkling of a connection, when there's klipa or a negative husk over the Jewish neshama, then it causes them not to believe what is our story, our legacy, and our heritage. That like God gave the Torah to Moses on a mountain, and it was written by God. So when a yid has got klipa on his neshama, it just creates doubt, and it creates like, no, I don't believe that. It makes no sense. Moses was enlightened, or maybe other people were enlightened, or maybe there were more than one author, and it takes away, I suppose, the innocence, the devotion that we were created in the image of God, and that the world was created in 6 days, and that the world is in Hebrew. That's what I loved about Anava's testimonial, is that he tells you what happened. Like when he was, at some point, he died in a taxi, and the taxi had his body, and the nefesh is connected to the body. So his body was like flying behind the taxi cab like a kite, And at some point, the cab went under a bridge, and he was at the height of that, so he went into it. And I thought to myself, he was going to see like the elements, he's going to see the molecules and everything. But that's still this physical world. He didn't. He saw the HTML of this website that we're in. He saw HTML being he saw the code. Yeah. And the code wasn't binary. It wasn't ones and zeros. It wasn't like JavaScript. It was Hebrew words.
Sanskrit.
It was Dvar Havaya V'chayei Ta'olam. It was literally the Hebrew words, and the way he describes it, it was like, I just believed everything that he said, because he was saying it with such passion. And not only that, the way he was saying it corresponded. It was like so much of what he said, I already knew.
And mapped onto your reality.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. It's been a really pleasure talking to you, and thank you for coming on. I'm glad I met you at my sister's table.
Likewise.
And I hope we can do this again in person, because there's something a lot of my motivation for this podcast is there's always that one thing that I can do over and over and over again is talk to people and talk with people and think with people, and especially when it comes like a text, right? Like the idea of a chavrusa, there, where you could learn the entire Torah with and be a Talmud Chacham, but your words don't go up to Shemaim. It says if you're learning by yourself necessarily, they might, but with a chavrusa, it's like guaranteed. There's a certain
Wow.
magic that happens when two people get to talk and bounce our minds off to each other, which is why it's called thinking aloud.
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Amazing. I'm glad it's amazing. Thank you so much.
By the way, I can help you with your rage and I can help you with your anger. Not maybe.
Okay, good to know. If I feel helpless, I haven't felt helpless yet. I feel like I'm on the right track.
I'm a resource here. That's all.
Thank you. Appreciate that a lot.
Life is not linear.